Thanks for joining me, everyone. This is Scott Love, bringing you a webinar on closing the deal, getting same-day acceptances of offers, sponsored by PC Recruiter. I'm really glad to do this for everyone. If you're not familiar with my background, some people call me a trainer. I think of myself more as a student of the business. I love this business. A lot of you know I've gone back to working at desk as well as doing some coaching and training. Most of my training is virtual, so I don't have to travel. Right now, though, I'm doing in-house training for a search firm in Texas, so they were nice enough to let me take some time and do this webinar for everybody. The one thing I always find, though, when I come to offices and train folks, I always just want to go back and make a lot of phone calls. My heart starts pounding a little bit more when I hear people talking about their deals, and it's pretty exciting stuff. So in this webinar, there's no way that I can cover everything that you need to know about closing deals in 30 minutes. So my goal for you is to convey a few key concepts that will help you make more placements, things that will help you to avoid all the pitfalls and all the danger areas when it comes to bringing closure to the deal. In the life cycle of a placement, this is the area that takes the least amount of time and is also the most volatile and takes the highest skill. It may take you months and months and months to find that right candidate, but it will only take you a few hours at the very end to bring closure to it if you do it properly. Remember, though, the close actually starts at the beginning of the process. When I'm talking about closing, I'm talking about getting the offer accepted by the candidate and making sure that they don't take that stinking counteroffer. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. This is only going to be 30 minutes. This is not going to be something where I'll be able to answer questions. I know I tried to do that last time, and I went over quite a bit. Because of my time today, I just can't do it. By the way, if you're a member of my coaching club, hopefully you got the email from Jessica that we didn't have that call today. I've only missed one other coaching call over the last year and a half since I started the coaching club. But next week we're going to have Ken Christian as our guest, so tune in then. Just log in, and the phone number and access code are on the coaching club members homepage. So let me tell you about how not to close a deal. If you've done this, then you're going to have to modify how you bring closure to the end of your placements. Let me share with you some things of what not to do. And if this sounds familiar, then, well, pay attention. Here we go. How not to close a deal. Number one, wait for the client to extend the candidate the offer. When you present the candidate to the client, they interview them, and now they're ready to make that person an offer. What you don't want to do is just wait for the offer to be extended to the candidate. Why is that? Because we don't want an offer to come forward that we don't know will be accepted. When we bring closure to placements, we want to make sure that any offer is given to the candidate is one that is going to be accepted. So what you don't want to do is just wait for the client. The client says, okay, Scott, we're going to make the candidate the offer and we'll be in touch. And you say, okay, you don't do that. I'll give you ideas on how you can handle that. Number two, you don't just wait to hear back from the candidate about the acceptance. Well, Scott, I got the offer. We're going to look it over, and we're going to think about it, and we'll be in touch. And you don't say, okay. You want to know exactly that the candidate is going to accept the offer before they get that by communicating that concept to them. And I'll give you a word-for-word script that you can use to make that happen. And number three, in how not to close a deal, we don't just wait to hear back from the candidate about the resignation meeting. There's a specific process in how you prep the candidate and how to turn their notice in and avoid a counteroffer. And unfortunately, due to time constraints, we were not going to be able to talk about that third one. If you have seen me speak, I could spend literally a whole day just on this one topic. If you remember the coaching club, you can log in and get a longer version of this. It's webinar number 31. So I'm not going to be able to talk about that. We will talk about how to bring closure to this deal by setting expectations. What really is important about the closing process? What do you need to focus on? Well, let me share it with you this way. When I was designing this program, I thought, well, I'm going to create a graphic image that shows you what's most important as you bring closure to the deal. And look over here on the right. I'm going to start from the right where it says expectations and work my way counterclockwise. Most of your value in bringing closure is how you set expectations between the candidate and the client. What that means is that you're telling them, this is what's going to happen as we bring closure to this. And I'll give you some scripting here in a second. We're going to go over that in several different ways so that by the end of this program, this free 30-minute webinar, you will not have as many problems as you've had in the past in bringing closure to your deals, because most of it is setting the expectations on what's going to happen. And then once you do that, gaining agreement from the candidate and the client. This is why your philosophy, or more or less, more like your attitude as a recruiter, is that you're a leader in the process. You need to set the tone that you're the leader in the process. So when you communicate to people, when you communicate to the candidates, you say things like this: Joe, let me make a suggestion. What I'd suggest we do is find out more about your background and see if this is a fit. So from the very beginning of the process, you're communicating to them as if you're in a position of authority. On the client side, at the very beginning of the process, you let the client know that you're going to be involved in the offer. Just today, at 5:30 this morning, I emailed a client prospect a proposal for a retainer. They called me on Thursday. They referred to me from a candidate. I qualified them, found out they've got a critical situation. It's not going to be worth my time to work it on a retainer, or excuse me, on a contingency basis, so I proposed a retain option, and we'll see if they do it. I think they might. If they don't, no big deal. But one of the things I told them in this proposal, I started off with, once I talk about my fee and why they should do it, I said, expectations for me. This is what you can expect. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to play games. I'm going to give you advice and consult to you and help you with your internal hiring process. And then I also put that I'm going to get involved in facilitating the offer to the candidate. I'm going to get involved in remaining on board with the candidate after they turn their notice in. So even from the very beginning, I'm letting them know that I'm going to be involved in bringing closure and extending the offer to the candidate. When you communicate that to your clients early on in the process, as you get near the end, it doesn't seem to be as big of a deal because they already knew it was going to be that way. At the very beginning of the process, you take the search and you tell them, this is how I'm going to work. And you can say things like this: Jeremy, let me tell you what you can expect from me and what I need to expect from you as we go forward. That's a good way to set the foundation of this relationship with this client forever. So they know that you're the professional. Think of yourself going into a doctor's office. You want that doctor to take a leadership role. You don't want the doctor to say, well, Scott, what do you think we should do? You don't want that. You want the doctor to say things like this: we're going to run a battery of tests, and if it's this, then we're going to do this, and this is what I really need for you to do, and this is what I'm going to ask from you, and this is what you can expect from me. That's how any professional is going to set the tone for that relationship. We need to do the exact same thing with the candidates and the clients. And then feedback, what that means is as we bring closure to this, we're paying attention. We're listening to the candidate. We're listening for pauses in their speech. We're looking for any sort of change in their behavior to tell us whether or not there's going to be some problems with this. And then the final part of that is moving it forward. And you can see I put it on a pie chart, and all these percentages came up, but it kind of shows you what's most important is setting expectations at the beginning, gaining agreement, getting feedback from them, and then leading it forward. Your job is to be a leader in the process, to lead this process forward. You're not pushing it. Nobody wants to follow someone who's being a pusher. You're being a leader, and everybody wants to follow a leader. Let me go to the next slide. This is the process here. So this is what's going to happen. We're going to prep the client in the beginning about how we work. We're going to prep the candidate about how we work. We're going to monitor the interest level of both sides when we know that the interviews have taken place and we're moving to the altar. We want to get married. We're going to test the offer with both sides. So when we know that the candidate's interested, we find out from the candidate what sort of range would you accept. So if they did make you an offer, what sort of offer would you accept? And then you drill it down, and if they say 85, well, would you take 80? Well, yes, I would. What about 75? No, I wouldn't. And we try to bring it to the close or to the point where we know that they will or will not accept a certain number. And if you have a candidate that says, I just want to see what the offer is, I'm not going to tell you anything, let's just see what your client can do for me, then you say things like this. You say, Jerry, if you were going to find a job on your own, then yes, that would be appropriate for you to wait and see what the client has. But because you're working with a third-party recruiter, I'm a third-party recruiter. I'm in the middle. I'm an intermediary between you and my client. It's very different. My job is to get an offer for you that you will accept. And when the offer comes forward, you're already going to know what it is, so you'll have the confidence to accept it when you get that. What I need from you is information that I can find out when I talk to my client that it will be worth your while. So when you find a job on your own, it's different. When you work with me, it's very different than when you do it on your own. So that's how you handle that concern with the candidate. And then number 5, we test it with both sides. We then confirm the acceptance, that the candidate will accept the offer. And once we know that the candidate is going to say, yes, I will accept it, then we allow the formal offer to be released, usually in an email is what they'll do. They'll email it to them. They can email it to you and then to the candidate. And if a client says, we want to make the offer, you say, that's okay, you can make it, but I want to find out what it is before you do so I can make sure the candidate will accept it. You can let your client do that. All you ask is that they send you a copy of that. And then we prep on the resignation process with the candidate. And then, of course, we follow the resignation process after it happens. And I'm not going to get a chance to really cover too much on the counteroffer right now, just because of time constraints. I could spend a whole day just talking about this topic. So check this out. And I'm going to send the guys at PC Recruiter this scripting so they'll be able to get it to you. We're going to cover this in several different ways. Let me just read this, and then I'm going to pick it apart and show you how each phrase impacts your process. Let's say I'm talking to a candidate, and we know that the second interview just took place and that the candidate's interested, and we have a feeling that the client is also. We told the candidate that we're going to get involved in the offer process in the beginning when we told them about how our process works. Now we're coming down to the details. And we say something along these lines. Say, Joe, once I find out what the offer is going to be for my client, I'll have a chance to tell you about that. So that way you can go home and talk about it. So that way if it's not going to work, you can let me know. I'll see what else my client can do. But if it does, I'll let my client know that they can release the formal offer. This gives you the confidence to accept the offer the day you get it, which does 2 things for you. First, it shows your new employer that you're decisive, that you can make important decisions very quickly. And second, it shows them that you're excited about the opportunity. When it's just how I manage the release of that information. Does that make sense, Joe? Do you feel comfortable with this process? That is something that you can tell them word for word, which will solve most of the problems on the candidate side. Let's break this down. Look at this phrase here, the one that's in white. I'll have a chance to tell you about it. So that way you can go home and talk about it. So if it's not going to work, you can let me know, and I'll find out what else my client can do. When we're telling the candidate this, we're letting the candidate know that it's a team deal when it comes to their family. Now, of course, we can't ask them if they have a family at the beginning of the process. If it's relocation, that's a critical issue. We can say things like, who else is involved in this process? Should a hire and a relocation take place? And if they say, my wife and kids, they open up the door, then we can ask about that. Because it's something that's not going to be a deal killer. It will be a deal complicator. So, for example, I've got a candidate right now whose spouse is from San Diego, California. And I told him, I said, when we go through this, I want your spouse to feel comfortable calling me at any point in the process. So I'm going to be reaching out to her sometime in the next week or so just to say hello, because I want her to feel comfortable enough to pick up the phone and call and talk to me about this. Something else we can also do is I can call when you guys are home over the weekend or over the evening, put me on speakerphone so I can talk to both of you, just so that both of you know that all 3 of us are working on this together. Now, when you have a candidate that allows you to do that, you've got a candidate that has now a lot of personal loyalty to you, and the spouse does as well. And that means that you're going to be included in those conversations. You're not going to see disappearing candidate tricks happen. When you don't have relationships with the candidate like that, then they're going to disappear. If they feel awkward, if they feel uncomfortable, they're not going to call you back. So you tell the candidate, I'm going to find out what this offer is so you can go home and you and Becky can talk about this and make sure it's going to work for you. If it's not, then you need to let me know that. And I'll see if my client can do anything else. Look at the next slide. But if it does work, I'll let my client know that they can then release the formal offer. What that means is that we don't want an offer to be given to a candidate unless the offer will be accepted. I've had candidates that have had concern. Well, what do you mean? I mean, what if I don't get the offer that they're looking? Or, you know, they have concerns about that. Well, I just want to see what they have. I told them this. I said, you know, if they give you an offer and it's not going to work for you, we're not going to know about it in the beginning. If they just give you an offer and it's lower than what you thought, then you're going to be upset. They're going to feel rejected, and that means that our relationship has ended. We're not going to go forward, and there's no hope of ever resurrecting you as a candidate. I like to tell people stories, and I tell them the story. It only happened once, but it's a story used every time with every candidate, and you only need one situation that can be a story that you can use forever, and it's a great way to explain concepts to people. So I tell the story of a candidate. I said, I had a candidate that my client was interested in, but his compensation expectations were above what they had in the budget. They wanted to give him an offer, but I knew that he wouldn't accept it, so I didn't allow the offer to be released. I told my client that it's just not going to work out. We can still be friends, and if your situation changes, he'd be very open to that. 6 months later, they got a new project with a bigger budget because they didn't have negative feelings about him, because they didn't feel like he rejected them and he didn't feel like they lowballed him. They were able to give him an offer, which he accepted, and today, he's still with the company, and he's the president of one of their largest divisions because I didn't let the deal die, because I let the offer go forward that was not accepted. It was rejected. So I like to tell people stories about that. But if it does, then I'll let my client know that they can release the formal offer. And check this out. This gives you the confidence now to accept the offer the day that you get it. Now look at that, the day that you get it. What are we doing? We're prepping the candidate to let them know you can accept the offer when you get it. You don't need to say, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. We're telling them, accept the offer the day that you get it. And one of the principles of sales is to always tell people why something is the way that it is. It does two things for you. This is going to give you the confidence to accept the offer the day that you get that, and there's two benefits for you. Now we're telling them why they should accept it the day they get it. We're giving them a reason. People don't do anything unless there's a reason for that. One of the words that you can use to close more sales and make more placements is the word because. When you tell someone to do something, like I need you to call me back after the interview, just say the word because. I need you to call me back after the interview because I want to hear from you first before I talk to my client. So if there are any concerns that you have, I'll know how to address it with them. That makes a lot more sense than I need you to call me back first after the interview. Always tell people why. So this gives you the confidence to accept it the day that you get it, which does two things for you, Joe. First, it shows your new employer that you're decisive, that you can make important decisions very quickly. Second, it shows them that you're excited about the opportunity. But it's just how I manage the release of this information. So you're giving them good reasons. All this stuff makes sense. They're hearing it, and they're saying, yeah, that makes sense. They're going to see me as being decisive, even though it's a pretty important decision, even though it's kind of scary. And I am kind of scared about making the wrong decision, but I will have thought about it. I will have discussed it with my wife. I will not have any hesitation at all about accepting the offer because I knew what it was going to be because my recruiter told me that. So, yeah, that makes sense. And then, yeah, they're going to think I'm excited because I'm making the decision quickly. I can see that makes sense when it's just how I manage the release of this information. Now, the very end of this is going to save you so many deals because you're doing two things. You're gaining an understanding, an agreement, and you're also getting a commitment. These are what I call the two magic questions. If you're in my coaching club, you've heard me talk about this almost every week. We want to ask the two magic questions. Does that make sense to you, Joe? So we're making sure. Do you understand what I'm telling you? And they answer in the affirmative. Yes, I do. Now we're asking for compliance. Do you feel comfortable with this process? Yeah, that's great. And they have to do it because they told you that they would. Remember, We want to talk about expectations and gain agreement. If you can do those two things, you've solved most of the problems on your deals. Let's move in a different direction. Like I said, I'm not going to have time to cover everything about counteroffers, but I will give you 11 warning signs of a counteroffer, because this is a very short webinar. 11 warning signs. If you see these, then you need to take note, and you need to be prepared. And one of the things I recommend that you do, when you prep candidates on not to take a counteroffer, you don't want to wait to the very end. You want to talk with them about this. First, you want to find out earlier in the process. Depending on the candidate's motivation, I'm going to ask them if about counteroffers. If it's a candidate that is actively interviewing, that wants to make a move, I'm going to ask him before the first interview. Once I prep him for the interview, I'm going to ask him questions like this. So can you see yourself going forward and turning your notice in and starting with another company here in the next 4 to 6 weeks? Can you see yourself doing that? Yes, I can. So if you did that and you turn your notice in, how do you think your employer would respond? And I want to find out, what does he think his company's going to do? How would you react to that? Well, if they try to fight to keep me, I'd have to consider what they have to say. I've got to keep my family's best interest at stake, and I owe it to them to at least hear my employer out and see what sort of counteroffer they have. Now, when someone tells you that, it means that they really don't know how the game is played. They don't know that they're going to be seen as someone that's turning into a mouth-breathing moron by their employer because they're leaving a competitor. They don't know that their employer is always going to question, are they at an interview when they're at the dentist's office? They don't know that stuff, so you need to educate them. So here are some warning signs. If you see these, then you know that a counteroffer could come forward. The candidate says he doesn't believe his company will give him a counteroffer. I always seem to get counteroffers from candidates that tell me, Scott, you don't need to worry about a thing. It's not going to happen. When they tell me that, I get really worried. When they tell you that, you don't want to say, oh, okay, I believe the candidate, so now I don't need to cover the counteroffer. That's an uncomfortable subject for me to talk about anyway, so I'm happy to not do it. And your candidate tells you, well, I never thought they'd do this, but they said they wanted to make me a partner in the company. I could have told you that was going to happen. When they're not expecting it, that's when they're going to get it. So you need to cover that with them. Number 2, the candidate says he'll have to consider it if it's given to him. So when you ask, can you see yourself turning in your notice? Yes. How would your employer respond? Well, they might try to fight to keep me. How would you respond to them? Well, I'd have to consider it. I want to communicate to the candidate that that is a danger. You need to be committed to going through this. If you're not, then maybe we shouldn't go forward. The takeaway. And I like to tell it to them this way. I say, I don't want it on my conscience that I put you in a permanent situation of permanent career damage if all you really want is just a raise. If all you want is a raise, I'm okay with that. I just need you to tell me that, and I'll tell you what to say to help you get that so we don't have to go down this process. If you're going to lose out on a candidate, this is the point to do it. Lose out early, not at the end. At this point, you want to educate the candidate. They're either naive or all they want is just a raise, and they're using you to get that. I want to lose out. I want them to lose out. I always found that the best candidates are the ones that have a professional motive, professional motivation that cannot be solved except for leaving the company. If there is there something that their company can do to keep them there, then the candidate is at risk. If it's just financial, the candidate is at risk. Number 3, the candidate's motive to move, just like I said, I don't like our policies here, could still be worked out by his employer when he leaves. I remember in recent years, probably about 4 years ago, I was making a placement, and the candidate was excited, and his primary motive to move was company's policies on managing projects. I don't like those. When I asked him, if they gave you a counteroffer, would you consider it? You know what he said? Yes. I tried to educate him, didn't get back at candidates, kind of just closed my eyes and crossed my fingers and lit a candle and prayed to the deal God that it would go through. And when he turned his notice in, the conversation turned from I'm leaving the company to the company saying, let's change our policies on how we manage projects. With a snap of fingers, they were able to solve his problem. His motivation had waned. It had evaporated. When the candidate's motivation is gone, and they've got an offer in hand from your client, what's going to keep them going forward in the process? Nothing. You need to test for those things. Number 4, the time that it takes for a candidate to call you back is longer than it normally has been. That's a tell. That's an indicator that tells us that there's some sort of a problem. That's when you know that maybe they're reconsidering things, especially towards the end when we're starting to close the deal. Number 5, the candidate agrees to accept the offer and then asks for one more thing after he gets what he's asking for. He gets the offer and keeps asking for stuff. That is a bad sign. That tells me you've got a nibbler, someone that's only interested in just them and not a mutual satisfaction of needs between them and their future employer. They're a taker. They're not a giver. Those people don't tend to be very good leaders, and they don't tend to last very long when they're making a move somewhere. Number 6, the feelings of the candidate's spouse are never considered during the process. Now, like I said, we can't ask candidates about who's at home and all that stuff, but we can say who else is involved in the move. Or if it's not a move, say talk to the people that mean a lot to you, and let's talk tomorrow about how they feel about that. You want them to bring it up. You want to be careful about that. And this ventures into employment law, and I'm not a lawyer. I can't give legal advice, but I just know that we want to be careful with that. But we also want to know that everybody at home feels pretty good about this move. I've always found that if the candidate is on the fence, I'll ask him, what does your wife think about this, or what does your husband think about this? I like to get the input of the people that are close to you that you're talking to about this. What do they think you should do? They think I should leave. Why is that? Well, she's tired of me complaining about the leadership of our company, but I'm just afraid to make the move. Okay, number 7. The client doesn't think meeting with the candidate after the offer is accepted is important. Once the candidate accepts the offer, there's still an enemy territory for about 2 weeks. You want to make sure that the client continues to build a relationship with the candidate, even after the offer is accepted. We want the candidate to feel included on the new team. The candidate could get buyer's remorse and start saying, gosh, I'm leaving my team. How could I do this to them? I'm feeling really guilty. We want them to feel excited about coming on a new team. The absolute best thing you can do is have your client and the client's spouse invite the candidate and the candidate's spouse over to dinner at their house. When you break bread in someone's home, you're building a richer relationship. And that relationship is going to be the energy that adds strength to the new bonds that the candidate has at your client's opportunity. Number 8, and I'm almost running out of time here. I've got about 2 more minutes. And like I said, this is a short webinar, so it's not going to be time to ask questions if you don't have any questions. Or if you have questions, you'll have to not ask them. Number 8, the candidate was never really sure about making a move to begin with. If you have a candidate that's just on the fence the whole way and they keep telling you, gosh, I just don't know, I don't know, I would really find out, is it really worth their while to go forward or not? Are you just trying to put a square peg in a round hole? You can't push people through the process. You need to find what that intrinsic energy is that exists in the heart of the candidate and use that energy to drive the deal forward. There will be people out there in the world that will go on interviews for you just because they like you. They will accept the offer because they like you, the recruiter. They don't want to disappoint you. They will do this, folks. They will get to the point of turning their notice in because they're afraid of disappointing you. And then when it comes to taking a counteroffer, they're going to take that counteroffer and they will disappear. They will never talk to you again because they're embarrassed. They don't want to disappoint you. and they're going to ignore your phone calls, and your client's going to get all ticked off at you and wonder, what kind of recruiter are you? We always want to give people a way out. We always want to remove the pressure from it and say things in the beginning of the process like this. Joe, this is your career. What my role at this point from now on is to be a facilitator of the process of you and my client and get to know each other. And if at any time you're not interested, I'm okay with that. I just need you to tell me that. I am committed to one thing, and that's you making a decision that benefits you and helps you get to where you want to go in your career. That's all I care about. Because guess what? That's what they're going to do anyways. Just admit it and tell them that. Now you've got them on your side. So if there is a concern, now they're communicating with you, and you can find out, is that a real legitimate issue that we can overcome or not? Number 9, the candidate has accepted a counteroffer before with the current company. So you always want to ask candidates, have you ever taken a counteroffer before? Oh, yeah, it's great. Worked out really well. That's a danger sign. Number 10, the candidate will not commit to turning a counteroffer with you when you're extending an offer. So when you're talking to the candidate about everything, towards the very, very end, before they get the offer. So how would you respond to your employer if they offered you a counteroffer? Well, I don't know. That's a danger sign, folks. There will be times where it would be wise for you to say, let's stop right here. If you're just not sure about this, I'm going to talk to my client and let them know that maybe we shouldn't release the formal offer until we know that you're sure. That would be appropriate in some circumstances. Other circumstances, the appropriate thing might be spin the dice and maybe you'll get lucky. But those are risky scenarios. Contingency recruiting especially is a risk management business. You want to spend your time in areas that will give you a greater return for it or do things that will increase your advantage. And the final one, the candidate verbally expresses concern about what will happen if I make a move and the economy gets worse. What that means is that they're just not sold, that it's the most prudent thing for them to move to your client. And you need to resolve that and still keep an eye on that candidate and get back up. Final tip, keep the client involved. Make sure that the client and the candidate are going to meet after the candidate turns a notice in. And don't just take the client's word for it, folks. I'm serious. You'll have clients that say, yeah, that sounds great, we'll do it, and then they blow you and the candidate off, and then everybody's wondering why the candidate isn't coming on board. You want to talk to the candidate and the client after they meet again on a social occasion. After the offer's done, this could be within 2 weeks. After the offer's accepted, you want to check in. Where did you guys meet? Oh, that's terrific. You met Gina's wife. Oh, what did you think? Oh, she is sweet, isn't she? Oh, they're so excited about you. That's great. You're starting next Monday. I'll call you Monday midway through the day just to check in and make sure you're doing okay. Here's my phone number. Here's my cell. Call me if you have any questions. You want to make sure that it actually happened. Now, when you follow up with the candidate, final tip, you want to also find out about the candidate when he and the client met, first day on the job, 2 weeks after they've been there, 4 weeks, and then every quarter for a year. You want to follow up with candidates. You can also use this as a sales tool when you tell your client that you follow up with every candidate every quarter for a year as long as they're with them. That's a good way to keep your base warm because those candidates, when it works out, they love you, they owe you, they're going to refer people to you, all their friends at their old company. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you about, if you're not familiar with the coaching club, go to my site and there's a link and there's a video that gives you a tour. That's actually about 6 months old. There's a lot more content. But just real quickly, I'll tell you what it is. If you're not familiar with this, I don't know if a lot of you guys knew this, but I'm kind of done speaking to the industry, folks. It's been great. I've enjoyed it. All my training is virtual. This is the only place you get my stuff. It starts at less than what's your cable bill every month. 2 people can get all of my training and membership in the coaching club, over 70 hours of audio downloads, 20 pages of scripts, 45 videos, weekly coaching calls, for less than what you pay for cable. It's a pretty good deal. All the information is on the site. I do a webinar once a month, and the price for that is anywhere from $97 and above. I'm actually raising the prices on my webinars. You get those included in your membership, plus there's probably about 40 to 50 past webinars that you can download off the site. We have weekly group coaching calls. You can connect with other recruiters every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, where now every month I'm going to start having experts that you can talk to that can give you value. It's a good way to connect with the coaching club, and you'll also get my advice. There's all this stuff is on my website, folks. Go to the link. It says Coaching Club. My website is greatrecruitertraining.com. All the information's there. It's a good value. I'm really proud of the site, and I'm proud of all the people that are closing deals because of that. You join that, they tell me that they close more deals because of it. That's what they say, and I'm really, really proud of that. Anyways, folks, thanks for your time, and we'll talk with you next time. You guys have a great day, and go out there and get on the phone. Take it easy.